Good evening, everyone. It is 5:34 p.m. on Monday, May 13th, I think. This is the Communication and Policy Committee of the Concord School Board. My name is Cara Meeker. I'm the chair. Also with me are committee members Liz Boucher and Jim Richards. And tonight, standing in for Barb Higgins is Pamela Walsh. Also with us here tonight is Kathleen Murphy and Karen Fisher-Anderson. The agenda tonight was modified from what you might have seen over the weekend. We just added a couple of things that had been under discussion but just didn't make the final print. So for those who might have an older publicly posted agenda, just so you know, we will have the review of the policy 430, but we will also tonight be discussing protocol for when a member would like to request a policy review, adding a new business line item to the general meeting agenda to address concerns around policy and other issues. And then it looks like we have an initial review of several policies around the use of facilities. Would anyone like to discuss, amend, or have questions about the agenda tonight? Excellent. With that, we'll just jump right into policy number 430. If you remember, we've been working on this for a few months now. We've seen a few different drafts. Tonight, as presented, is kind of, I would say, back to what I would like to say is the first draft of the policy. We're really trying to adhere to a set of rules around drafting policies that shows changes based on our last amended policy. And so this draft that you see tonight is all of the changes that we've been discussing but have been put in the way, like, how do I describe it? It's now been applied to the original policy that was last amended in 2018. So you should be able to see all of the changes in strike through and in red type. Also in the margins, you will see that Bridget Ettinger at the district and myself and probably Karen and Kathleen have all had hands on it to put in the margins where in the law, whether it's RSA, the education rules, or federal law, as well as if there are recommendations by the New Hampshire School Board Association in terms of language, those have been marked in the margins. Would anybody like time to read it? It is fairly thick. I don't know if Pam, if you've had a chance to look at it. We can certainly go through it for a few minutes quietly, or if you guys are ready to jump in, I will turn it over to Karen.
I thought you were going
Kathleen.
to walk through it.
Oh, I'm happy to walk through it. Would you like me to do it?
Yeah.
Great.
Yep.
All right. I'm going to give everybody just a second to flip through. Do you want an older version?
No, I just wanted to see some other notes that I initially made
Okay,
to make
great.
sure that they are.
Karen has older notes too if we need to go back and look. Too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So the idea is that we've already done a substantial amount of work on this. So everything that you're going to see here is something that generally or specifically we have seen, we have discussed, but has been reformatted so that it directly amends the original policy. There's been a lot of hands on the document in the district, and so people have ideas, they have thoughts on phrasing, and so it got out of our hands a little bit in terms of tying it to the original policy to make sure that it's very clear on what is being amended, what's being added, what's being taken out, that kind of thing. So what we're seeing here tonight is just kind of connecting those dots. So if there's anything language-wise that you feel you haven't seen, we can certainly talk about it. And I will happily walk you through section by section. And then I think really when we get to the end in terms of notification and retention, that's the sections that were added that we haven't yet discussed, just because we haven't made it that far into the document yet. So at that point, I'll probably ask if anybody has questions on those new sections.
I have a question. Why did we switch from student to child?
It's in the RSA, that's the legal definition. Because now students can stay in school, or excuse me, children can stay in school until age of 22.
So does this policy then not apply to students who are older than 18?
No, it does.
I think what it does is it wraps in,
Up to 22.
it just uses the RSA definition of child.
Yeah.
Yep.
Which incorporates any student, if the last sentence includes a person in actual attendance at a school who is less than 22 years of age and has not yet received a high school diploma. So I think it's just wrapping in more RSA language.
The only question I had was on page 5, up near the top item, number 5. During the administration of restraint, the physical status of the child, including skin temperature, color, and respiration, shall be continuously monitored. Does that mean that we need to have someone there with a thermometer monitoring their temperature? And how does one monitor respiration other than just visual ability? Is that clear?
Yeah, what happens, Jim, when, in those cases is when they see a youngster that looks under distress, they call the nurse immediately. So
Okay.
you're not asking somebody who's not used to doing that kind of work, they'll call the school nurse, or a nurse that's in the building. You know, sometimes, some of the students actually have a nurse assigned to them.
Yeah. And
I
that's-
just don't like
Okay,
prefer-
that's fine. I just
prefer
wanted to
using
make
student. I
sure
don't
that
like
we-
that as in our policies, but I see why they did it, but.
Yeah, for sure.
So, yeah, I just wanted to make sure that if we were monitoring a temperature as a requirement, that they had the proper equipment to be able to
But you understand
support
that some,
but I'm sure that the
during a
nurse
restraint
does.
or even a seclusion, that may not be
Nurse.
possible. So most of it at that point may be just simple observation. So you
Okay.
need to have a nurse that has
Okay.
those.
I just was checking to see if observation was adequate, or if you needed like a remote, you know, thermometer to measure temperature, so that someone was doing that. Because this leaves a little bit to, as I read through this before, it just led a little bit open to interpretation and
Is that,
challenge.
are those the words in the RSA, that those specific words?
Is it, sorry, it's under 5.
Page 5, item 5, coming down from the top.
Oh, yes, there it is.
Because it says shall be continuously monitored, so I agree with Jim on that. Shall be continuously observed.
And now we
Shall-
have a co-monitor person too.
Well, we have to have a monitor.
Right. I just gave the RSA away.
Because that's concerning.
I mean, monitored makes it sound like it's not just an observation, and I just wanted to make sure that, you know, that was.
Continuously monitored, yes, it sounds like.
When a student is in seclusion, there must be, according to this policy, somebody to monitor that.
But you're not continuously monitoring their skin temperature
No,
and
no, no, no,
respiration,
no,
which is what
they're
this policy
monitoring, right.
says, is I think what he's saying.
I mean, it just struck me, I don't know if it's right or wrong, but it just struck me as like, if I was challenging this policy as something that was done or not done, I would say, show me the monitor, the continuous monitor of their temperature to tell them
Yeah.
that they never went.
And this is during administration of restraint.
Yeah.
Not just seclusion, this is restraint. And it says including skin temperature, the only way you can monitor skin temperature and respirations is actually physically using equipment.
Something to
And you
monitor.
understand that you can't do that sometimes.
Right.
We do.
Well,
No,
that's
we
what-
understand
we
you
just
can't do that,
wanna-
I'm just questioning whether this is the right verbiage, the
Yeah.
right,
Right.
the
We
right
all
words to be
completely
used.
understand that.
Right, and it's new language, and so the question is, if it is in the RSA and it needs to basically mirror the RSA, then we live with the ambiguity. If it's not, we are empowered to actually like update the language. I don't see it in the
It's not in,
RSA.
I don't remember seeing that exactly. The go by. And I think that's even in
What do you
our,
mean to go by?
New Hampshire School Board
New Hampshire
Association.
School Board Association.
So,
So can we highlight that for a potential edit?
Yeah. Jim, which letter was that?
It was on page 5, it's number 5 coming
Okay,
down
number
from the
5,
top.
okay. Yep.
And do you have a suggested edit?
Well, are we required to list out including skin?
Yeah, I mean, we
Temperature,
don't, yeah, the observations are made, and if they feel that child is in distress, they call the nurse, and if the nurse feels that the child needs additional medical care, they call the ambulance. That's as
Well,
simple.
During
how
the
it works.
administration of restraint
The physical
is
touch
observed,
shall be
continuously
continuously
observed.
monitored.
I would just say
Seriously
continuously.
observed.
Maybe we should put in observed rather
And
than
then get
monitored.
rid of
Get
skin
rid of the
temperature,
clause
color,
and be
respiratory.
including.
Yeah.
But again, that's,
Yeah.
he doesn't
It-
have a footnote by it.
Yeah, that was a.
Oh, it is in the- there it
It
is.
was a recommendation from the New Hampshire School Board Association.
And it is also in section 126U4, Rome 5. Let me just read it real quick. Other forms of physical and medical restraint shall be administered in such a way so as to minimize physical harm. During the administration of restraint, the physical status of the child, including skin temperature, color, and respiration, shall be continuously monitored.
Well, then that's
Then
it.
that's
All very statutory
Okay.
driven, yeah.
Then we may have to look at procedures for monitoring, that we use when someone is in restraint. And I would give that back to the nurse and say, okay, how would you make sure we adhere to these, this requirement from the state RSA?
And then when we can't, we don't.
Yeah.
Okay.
Please understand that when it's a situation where we
Yeah.
can't, we don't, and we get the appropriate help to help the nurses.
Yes.
And I've seen that happen.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the right thing to do.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, of course.
That's a great catch, Jim.
Any other?
So it would have been right here.
Do we want
It would
to,
have
we
been
can't
as part of
include a
this.
line that says
No, I got
monitored,
it.
meaning,
What's the number?
It's.
I mean,
right here.
or just deal with the
126,
ambiguity?
It can be
5B,
more restrictive, not less
26
restrictive.
U
5B.
So, yeah.
But we don't know what they mean by monitoring either.
Well, and they,
Monitor.
Nor do they give us a
correct,
suggestion
it is-
of
it
how
is-
to monitor those
So
things.
we can decide what monitoring means because it's not otherwise defined.
Well, I made a note of that, so
Okay.
I will work with the nurses and we'll have them look at that in terms of what they do.
And maybe they define
Karen, I had
monitoring.
a question about, I noticed, and maybe it's alphabetical, that you had changed around some of the, the order of the definitions. So we have intentional physical contact on page 1 under the definition section. And it really isn't, it doesn't fall within the statutory definition. It's weird because I was trying to differentiate the two. It's separate from restraint, believe it or not. So the best example I can give you is, let's say you have a child who's acting out and they go to strike Kathleen, and I'm standing here and I see the blow coming. I might put my arm out to stop the blow. I'm still required to report that. But
Oh, so
we
you're
put
saying
it-
that intentional physical contact falls under the definition of
It
restraint?
doesn't, that's the
Okay.
difference. So I don't know, I think it needs to be its own section, because we have it under the definition under 125U1. And I think before we had it a little further out.
did. We
And as
did.
I was looking at it, I was like, it's still technically in the previous edition, it was still under the definition section, but that's the one section, and I'll point it out later on. It repeats itself later on in the reporting documentation phase. So, but I think we have to be careful about putting it as an RSA 125U1 because it is not defined in that section.
Well,
So where is it usually
Oh, I see what
defined?
you're saying. Because we've now labeled the definition section as referring to an RSA section, you think
Correct.
everything should fall. Well, then, from my perspective, the citations for the RSA should come out. Because for me, these are all the definitions that are applicable to our policy and not necessarily a direct line to the RSA.
Okay.
I agree with that.
And you have the right to do that.
Yeah.
You don't have to, as long as you have the essence of that law in the language, where you put it is in your hands.
Yep. But like, for example, it does fall under 126U6, and I think that's 6, if I'm looking at my Roman numeral, which we can talk about later on. It has its own section. But if you want to, again, I would just ask you to look at that and see if you think that's the proper place to have it.
I think definitions belong together. I don't
Okay.
think we want two definition sections.
Right.
I'm okay with striking RSA 125.
But you gotta do it on all of it.
Yeah.
I
Right.
think.
So this was something that kind of came up in terms of like leading readers where
Yeah.
these sections come from.
Does not, okay.
It's
But-
still up for conversation.
Yeah, I think if you gotta go one way or the other, and I think our policies could get awfully bogged down with citation. I mean, we
Well,
talked
you
about
just,
this.
I think we were
Yeah.
trying to make sure that you knew where it came from.
Yep.
And so that's why the citations are all over the place. We can easily eliminate those.
No, I just think like if you're,
Because your last
if
page.
it ends up like having 3 definition sections in order to refer to the RSAs, and I
Yeah.
think it's not.
And your last page does have all
Yeah.
your legal
Right.
references, so
Right.
you,
I understand the intent. It was a recommendation to provide clarity.
Yeah.
But I think as we're working through this particularly complex policy, it's a great example of how that can actually create more confusion if we're trying to label every single thing
Right.
along the way.
right.
So yeah, I'm fine with taking it out, because I do think, because I agree, Karen, the second portion of the intentional physical contact does not include A through E. That was relocated from the original policy further along.
Right.
But it makes sense to me that intentional physical contact as a defined term would have what it includes and what it doesn't include all together
Yep.
in the definitions section, even if it's not fully covered under the RSA.
And it's important that that's there, that's something that happens. A principal or, one of our teachers would do blocking. I mean, they're taught to do that, so they don't get hurt, the youngster doesn't get hurt.
On page 4, in the section D, number 3 and 4, I just think, on D, numbers 3 and 4.
Yep.
Under 3, we have building principal or supervisory employee designated to provide such approval. And then under 4, we have supervisory employee designated by the principal. So I think we should use designated by the principal on the first reference, and then we don't necessarily need it again on the second, but I think it's just flipped in terms of references.
Yeah, or the principal or a designated supervisory employee.
Yeah, or if we want to specify that it's the principal who does the designation, or a supervisory employee designated by the principal. You see it,
Which I
Karen?
think that's how it was initially. Or
I just think it says that in
Right,
section
right.
4, so in number
Right here.
4,
Yeah.
so I just think putting it in 3, so it's on the first reference.
So we want three's new language to reflect what is written in
In
number 4.
4.
So the principal or supervisory employee designated by the principal
Yeah.
should be spelled out in 3 as well. Okay, got it.
I don't think you need it spelled out in 4 either, again, but
Right.
that's fine, but,
Right, for the first,
yeah.
it kind of creates the loosely defined
Yeah.
term.
So the language in 3 should say the principal or supervising employee designated by the principal.
Yes.
All right, I just want to make sure I have the right,
And then in 4, we could actually remove
You could
the
just say,
designated
yeah.
by the principal because it's already been established.
You'd say, or the designated supervisory employee.
Yep,
yeah.
I like that.
Co-regulator? Does that come later, or I don't see that in the definitions.
It is not in the definitions. It came up for discussion when we were talking to John, and it was sort of just, it's something that's a little more flexible, I think, than a defined term. And so I think everybody at that point was comfortable just leaving it as sort of like a reference point within the section.
Where are you, Liz?
I just
What page?
asked about co-regulator.
Co-regulator.
I didn't see it. No, I just said I didn't see it as a definition.
It's
Co-regulator.
in the text, but
Yeah.
it's not in the definition section.
Right.
It is in, oh my gosh,
Forget where it
help
is.
me remember.
Should have brought my glasses, I forgot this printing was.
We'll find it.
I mean, if John explained it, that it is not. I'm just looking at another example of a policy that has it in its definitions, and it says co-regulars should be in priority order, a trusted selected adult, a
Yes,
clinician,
it's on
counselor,
page
or
6,
trained.
number 3 of
There it is.
Yes.
section G.
Yes.
When seclusion is used, school staff shall designate a quote-unquote co-regulator to monitor in order of preference, A through D. And it's not in the definition section, just I think because it's not
You felt
what
that it
we would
wasn't.
consider a fully defined term.
That's fine.
It's a little more nebulous.
On page 6,
Mhm.
E, have doors which, it should be have doors that are either not equipped. And then I had something more substantive under training.
Hold on, I have to make that change. So, have doors that,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Are we correcting the RSA again?
Are we?
Yes,
Have
I believe we are.
Which, yeah, I think we are too, but.
It's grammatically incorrect.
Well, who wrote, just remember who wrote them.
I know.
Administrative services, right?
No, legislative.
Legislative services, right,
Yeah.
yeah,
They do the best they can with the time they have,
which is not a lot.
which is not a
It's,
lot.
I have that, let's see.
What do you have?
Which are, I wrote that, but that's an older draft, so.
What about the law?
The law is it's U5B.
Again.
Hang on a second, U5B.
You have the
is-
flexibility to do that and to make it right.
I would suggest we make it
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
We are
Yeah.
following the intent of the
That's right.
legislation.
Indeed.
That's
All
right.
due respect.
So,
Yeah, go with
All right,
it should say that.
Because if unless the legislative intent was only that we have doors. 'Cause,
That's true.
but under training, and this is more a question for the superintendent, it just strikes me as odd that we are having the assistant school it's the assistant super, never mind. I thought it was the assistant principal in the building, so I was like, that sounded weird.
you're like, that's
Yeah.
less authority. Yeah, the assistant superintendent for student
Yeah.
services, yeah.
They do a good job with training. And then during our PD time, during the year when we have our full days, then we also always have a section in there for training for staff, and that's really important because we have new staff coming in all the time.
Cara, on page 3, under, it's the very last, it starts with restraint. And at the very last sentence, restraint shall be used. And I think since we're doing away with the shall be used, we've got to move only by up. Do you see that very last sentence there?
Right, so restraint shall be used only by trained personnel?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mine's, are you gonna keep it down by itself?
No, it's
Okay.
split because it's striking current language that is 2 different paragraphs and combining those 2 paragraphs into one. So when the track changes will be approved,
Okay.
then that becomes 1 paragraph.
Okay.
I might be missing it. But I wonder if there is a requirement in here, or whether we should consider an annual report to the school board on use of restraints and seclusion.
As you know, I know you know this, we report every June, so you could get that report. We have all the where the restraints occurred and also where the seclusions are, and we have to do that annual report to the DOE. So.
And do you think that that's a report that requires presentation or just issued to the board for?
You know, I've used Krista McAuliffe as a classic example. You know, people were concerned about the number of restraints at Krista. Well,
Well, that's because it was in the
because
newspaper.
What's
That
that?
was because it was in the newspaper too. There was an article written.
Right, but the
that-
problem is, that people don't realize, is that she's surrounded by 3 major streets, and she has to restrain a youngster who wants to fly out that door. And, you know, that does happen. As you know, we had somebody, you know, last week hop on the city bus and go to his father's house. You know, I mean, so they have to be able to restrain them, and that's why you saw that at Krista. This year, and again, sometimes it depends on the year and the kids and.
Right. So what what I'm hearing is that a presentation to the board might provide more context than just issuing
Yeah.
a report. Is
Yeah.
that something that you
Yeah.
think
Or
would
you
be
could just show a report annually to the board, and it can be up to the board
to ask for more?
like
Yeah,
ask
but
how
John
it
would
the manner it wants it.
Yeah, John, happy to do
Yeah.
that and include that in a report. But I think it's, you know, we need to be, and here's the other thing, you don't have 3-hour programs in every school, so
Right.
Beaver Meadow and middle school, you're gonna perhaps see more because, you know, on occasion, we need to support a youngster. The high school, we try really hard not to do that at the high school because of the size of some of the kids. And you have to use verbal cueing to be able to control them. Sometimes it's very difficult for them.
So I'm trying to think.
Where would we put that?
Yeah, I was just going to say in the
Back to
reporting
some-
requirements.
Yeah.
At the very end.
Very end?
Yeah, you
duty
could
to
just add a
report.
new.
How
Yeah,
about
I think-
dissemination and notice?
I think a
No.
lot of the questions arose because of that newspaper article.
Sure. People have
Right,
so
so
many
it
questions.
is, but that might have been helped had there been.
Yeah, I think
11.
you could do an
There been
R.
some questioning or
Do an
public
R, the
comment.
superintendent shall report annually to the school board on the use of seclusion and restraint.
And I guess it's helpful for us to track because we would see what's changing in our community, needs of students.
But I do agree, like, the public presentation helps. I think we did have a public presentation after the
We
newspaper.
did.
And, you know, it helps, the context helps, like when people see the numbers and they're just numbers, and it's not, well, this was a teacher grabbing a kid's arm before they ran out into the middle of Spring Street or Pleasant Street, you know, that's different than a kid, you know, how people might be imagining it.
Correct. When going back to Pam said on training, and then
Page.
with the superintendent goes, training is page 6,
Page
but
6.
on page 7, where it says any staff member who administers physical restraint or seclusion shall verbally inform the principal. Just going back to the intentional physical contact, does that need to be an occurrence as well? Does that need to be recorded or being reported to the principal?
Yes, it's under, and it should be under the section on bookkeeping, not bookkeeping, but,
Record keeping.
yeah.
So it's section I, which the title begins on 6. So actually, Liz, you're referring, number 1 is referring to what's under section I, notice and record keeping requirements.
Where?
So are you,
sorry.
because you're looking at the very first line on page 7, right?
Yeah.
Which is number 1. That's actually the very first paragraph under.
I think
Notice and
Liz's
record,
question was, though, we have physical restraint, we have seclusion, just physical contact. which
Yeah, does
is
the
a-
intentional physical contact need
That's
to be
a third
listed in there?
category.
Yes. that has
Yes,
to be-
it does.
That
and
has to
it
be,
has
that
to be-
also has to be
Yeah,
reported.
and it's in here again later on. It's under, I can find you.
Hold on.
It's under, on page 8, under,
Number 5, whenever a school employee has intentional physical contact with a child.
yeah, and then you
So
go
there's a
down under
separate paragraph
6,
just for
and then
that.
it's, you know, the A through E. And that's part of our older policy, believe it or not, our existing one. It was
Mm-hmm.
a form that was connected to, behind our policy called the intentional physical contact form, and it laid out everything it had to report, so.
So that's a
stuff.
separate means of report, different
That's-
documentation than if it were a seclusion or restraint. That's why it has a separate section.
Correct.
Although now that you Such notification shall be made no later than the time of the return of the child to the parent at the guardian at the end of the business day, whichever is earlier. What's the, I don't see a choice there.
I think you need an or. I have that marked down too. You think you need or, and that shows up previously.
Or earlier? I like, because there's not a,
I believe if you look
or
at,
at the end of the business day?
or by the end of the business
Yeah, what page are you on?
is what is
Same page?
listed. So
8.
page 8, paragraph 5.
It was on there, why couldn't
And I looked at it at a previous,
It's the,
Here it is.
on page, on item 2 of page 7, it has the same sort of wording.
I was gonna
And
say,
I would
that's where I
use
saw
that
that.
wording
Okay.
again, if it was me. Which comes out as being,
As soon as practicable.
shall be made as soon as practicable and in no event later.
yeah, that one has too many though.
That
I feel
is
like.
too much. Or, yeah, so, or by the end of the business day. So I would just use the or the by the end of the business
Business
day
day.
on paragraph 5.
And,
And 2?
and in 2
2.
on page 7.
I think that's clear. if you
Because
do
in
that
no
wording.
event later than the
It's just-
return of the
Alright,
child.
alright, so you gotta
And then you
read it.
say, or the end
Or,
of the.
but it-
Read
I
what
think
you-
I'd just, yeah, it'd be much clearer and everyone would understand it more.
So you
if
just wanna
did that.
delete it, or whichever is earlier?
No.
No.
We need, so let's
Not that.
do a consistent one. So on 2, such notification shall be made as soon as practical or
As soon as practical.
Practicable.
Practicable.
or by the end of the business day, whichever is,
So we want to strike and in no event later than the time of return of the child to the parent or the guardian.
although that doesn't work either because
Yeah.
as soon as practicable is not necessarily a choice between that or the end of the business day. So you could get rid of whichever is earlier. And just say, but no later than the end of the business day. Or by the return of the child. I think that was probably a better policy, because you don't want the kid going home and giving a report without having the parents having been informed.
Just at the time of the return of the child.
So it could be as soon as practical, or.
The child's not
but-
sleeping over, so it has
But,
to be.
but in no event later than the time of the return of the child to the guardian.
Yes.
And leave it
Period.
that.
Period.
And do the same on page 8 in paragraph 5.
Yeah.
Yes.
I don't think you need the next sentence. I think it's sort of repetitive.
The notification shall be made.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because we're just saying that above there.
Let me just check the RSA.
Yeah, it is kind
Yeah.
of redundant.
Yeah, it's
Did you
redundant.
get that
Yep.
change in that?
I did right here. It's on page 7.
It's in the RSA.
Of course it is.
Of course.
But in.
So such notification shall be made as soon as practicable,
But.
and we're rocking out, and in no event later than the time of the return of the child to the parent or guardian, or the end of the business day, whichever is earlier. So that is the RSA. Notification shall be made in a manner calculated to give the parent or guardian actual notice of the incident at the earliest practicable time. We have practical. That is also RSA language. So, I would say the only thing we really can do, because I don't think this is open to interpretation.
But I think we could make it stricter, which is saying by the return of the child. Because that is earlier than the end of the business day. So we could make it a stricter and clearer interpretation and keep that manner calculated.
Yeah, I think we have to keep the final sentence. But I agree, we could stick with what we have, which is such I'm gonna read it, I apologize. Such notification shall be made as soon as practicable and in no event later than the time of the return of the child to the parent or guardian, period.
Yes.
Yes.
Notification shall be made. So then, and then this repeats in number 5 on page 8.
So no but?
Yep.
Practical.
Right, it's no and. And and no event.
That's what we have. All right, okay. All right.
Okay, I love it.
That one. on.
Give me more. What else?
That's what I had.
Repeat on page.
I just have a question under 7 on page 8, which is paragraphs Roman numeral
It's
4 and 5.
highlighted.
We
It's
need to-
highlighted for correction.
Yeah, we need to fix that, and
Yeah.
I'm assuming that will be a lettered paragraph prior. I know we put them out of order a little bit, but I think it's just gonna refer back to.
I think we could probably just now say this section,
Yeah, section,
because it's all now condensed into this reporting.
I will point out, just looking at this section, we're using student.
We missed
Yep.
it.
Where?
right below on 7A,
Student,
Oh, yeah.
the child.
and B and C.
Yeah.
Read it too many times.
And also under retention of records, on M, page 9, the student is or was.
Yep.
That's again language, by the child, let's see, the child,
So it looks like we just need to do a find and replace for any mention of the term
Yeah.
student.
instead of, yours says child, mine says, I'm looking at
We're
it.
looking at the wrong one.
Child,
Yeah, it says child.
where are you, are you on page 8?
I'm on page 9.
Okay, did you get 8? You're right, it says child.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah, you were looking at the wrong
here's,
policy.
here's another one under
Told you to
students.
get rid of those policies.
Draining and misbehaving students' attention should be child. On page 8, 7C, when the contact with the student is incidental or minor,
Mm-hmm.
and then below again, students' attention right at the end of the sentence.
Yeah, the entire section.
Yeah.
It's just the
Just do a
the
word,
numbering was
whatever it is.
updated, but not the
Word change.
the terminology.
One small point on the very first page on the definition of parent. I know that in the, on one of the earlier drafts, it now says means a parent or legal guardian. I had put in there, for the purpose of this policy, because depending on what you're looking at, there's definitely different definitions of, parent. Like, for example, in FERPA, under FERPA, we had this issue come up at Beaver Meadow School. They define a parent as an individual, biological, adoptive, grandparent, step-parent, or other relative with whom the child lives. So I didn't know if you just want to say, I mean, we're defining it for purpose of this, but that's not the overall definition. So just small, whether you want to, for this purpose or this
So
occasion.
is the recommendation, so, hold on, is
I would
parent
want a
in,
parent or legal guardian.
so parent was in the original policy, it is not in the RSA, and has only been slightly modified. Are you recommending that we modify it further to be more inclusive?
I am not. I don't think we should. I think we should have a parent or a guardian, because you're talking about significant issues here. And just because they're living with the uncle or the aunt, I'm not sure that they have the authority to make decisions. I know they don't.
They don't. A
Unless they,
step-parent wouldn't.
right.
Yeah.
So we've had issues with step-parents who are not legal guardians, who want to be engaged, and they can't be. They don't have the legal authority to do it. This is a legal document. I would not fool with it.
Okay.
I'm very
Medical-
happy with
from a
parent
medical
and
But
guardian.
you
it
want
needs to be a guardian, a legal
Karen was
guardian.
actually not suggesting changing the definition. She was
No, just
saying
saying-
changing the just pointing out that it's only the definition for
This
this
purpose.
policy,
particular one.
Right,
which I'm okay with.
yeah.
Although now that I've heard the FERPA definition, I'm a little offended by it actually, and I will be talking to people about that.
Okay, well, all right. Okay. So what I'd like to do now is just, rather than go line by line, I'd like to just go section by section, just so that we understand the flow of the document. And then if everyone is satisfied with the way the document is framed out, then we could consider moving it to the full board for first reading, with the understanding that any technical corrections, any formatting issues, all of those things can be corrected between first and second reading. And I leave it to the group to decide if the policy is ready to move forward. So, starting from the top, we have a policy on restraint and seclusion. So much like our other policies, it begins with an introduction and purpose. For whatever reason, our habit is to not number our purpose statement, so that's why it's not otherwise beginning with A. So section A is now our definitions section. It incorporates definitions from the RSA, definitions from our own understanding, for instance, parent, and then also we've moved language from the original policy into the definitions section as, for instance, the second paragraph of number 2 around intentional physical contact. Everything is now in alphabetical order. And it ends with serious injury now. Trained staff used to be under the definitions section. That has been taken out because we now have an entire section just on training. We move then to limitation of the use of restraint to emergencies only. The document is a little cumbersome in pointing you toward that we do not use certain forms of restraint like prone restraint, but it is laid out in the definition section and further. So we're talking about limited uses of restraint, what type of restraint, so that's B and C. We have section D, which is the monitoring of extended restraint. We have, I believe, improved the clarity on who is designated to do that. And then we have prohibition of dangerous restraint techniques, which lays out the physical impact of certain restraint techniques on children and why that is prohibited. We have then from paragraph or section F forward, we are now moving into seclusion. So that first section of the document is all restraint focused, and now we're moving to seclusion. So now we have essentially the same pattern. We have limitation on the use of seclusion, and then conditions for seclusion in section G, the training required for both restraint and seclusion, and then the rest of the document is about giving notice and keeping records. A lot of the language for notice is from the original policy. It's been modified slightly just to eliminate some old headers that are no longer relevant. And then, that's actually a pretty long section. And then we get to section J, which is incidents of serious injury or death during incidents of either restraint or seclusion. This section is kind of floats by itself. It might need to be moved. I've been thinking about it because now we are into restriction of the use of mechanical restraint during the transportation of children. So it's just sort of tacked on to the end. I might consider moving that elsewhere in the document, but I just wanted to leave it where it was right now. And then we move into the school review following any incidents of restraint or seclusion, reporting of violations and complaints of violations of this policy, and then the investigation and resolution of those complaints. These sections, as you'll see on page 10 and 11, are all in red. These sections have not yet been discussed. So I just wanted to open that up to Kathleen or Karen, just to quickly give us a heads up on why they're in the policy now, where the language came from, and all that good stuff.
I thought it was really important that we have a process for families to process to follow should they have a complaint about how restraint or seclusion was provided. And so I thought it was really important when we have other policies of, for example, bullying, we have a process where parents can have a process in which they can complain. So I felt the same way with this, given the seriousness of this policy.
Is the language here, I see that there are references to the educational rules and the RSA. Is it primarily from that, or is this also taken from like the bullying policy?
Some of it is right straight from ED rules. Those are our minimum standard rules, and some of them are right out of the RSA on this policy. So we just pulled those right out. We did not have it before.
the recommendation from the New Hampshire School Board Association, Will Phillips made a footnote in there, and he said, even though there aren't specific provisions mandating this, however, if DOE or Department of Homeland Security, which we wouldn't deal with, if there's a complaint, they're going to come asking us for this kind of information, and therefore, he thinks having a specific process for reviewing and documenting complaints that the district level is warranted. So it's kind of a best practice recommendation.
And for instance, the section N, duty to report, and O, complaints of violation, these were already on the books. So
Yeah.
these would have been applicable even if it wasn't in the
Right,
policy.
because they came out of ED and also RSA, so,
Okay.
yeah. I really like it because it does, if you, even the resolution and the timelines, I think that's important, you know, for our administrators or whoever's doing the investigation to follow.
Where did section P come from? Investigation and resolution. Is that? Oh yeah, it's also from the ed rules. It's got to
New
be.
Hampshire School Board Association, wasn't
Yep.
that part of the?
Yep, and
Yeah.
this, it came right out of the sample policy.
It came
that
out
they
of the
up with.
sample from the School Board
Okay,
Association.
great. Does anybody have any questions on these sections specifically?
I mean, to your point about where serious injury or death, I think you could switch it with, just put it right below restriction on the use of mechanical restraint, and then it's with then it's in the sort of review and follow up and reporting,
So swapping J and K.
swapping J and K.
Yeah. It's just it's an odd
Yeah.
an
No,
odd like caveat.
It fits better with like sort of the after you've gone through everything else.
I'm gonna switch K with J. K. G,
Switch them.
H,
And make it, I see
So
more.
you're just switching those two
student, child,
paragraphs?
Bob.
Yeah.
Based
yeah,
on
we'll,
their,
we'll do a
Just-
J and
a
K.
search and
Topic.
replace.
All right.
I apologize. I have a sick kiddo at home, so I'm just making sure that's not her. Okay. Liz noted more instances of the use of the term student rather
Yeah.
than child. So I think just as
We'll have- make
a
sure
cleanup
that she-
measure, we'll just
yeah.
do a find and
I'll have-
replace.
I'll have,
Well, with that to say, is there any reason why the term
Bridget.
student should stay in any section? Because otherwise, I would just replace them all.
Yeah.
No, because we define child, not
Right.
student.
Right. Okay.
N, number 3, under N, should say in good faith, that's just a spelling error.
Can you say that one more time? In section N?
N, number 3, I think it should say in good faith.
Not in good faith there?
Faith?
I agree to disagree. This is funnier. Yes, and I did notice there was the word earlier, height, was spelled high. But I lost it. I'll find it. So, but again, these are technical updates that can be made.
01. If you go to the second, just in general, an individual may file a complaint with the superintendent's office alleging a violation of this policy or RSA 126-U. The complainant should be encouraged to document the complaint in writing with the information listed in paragraph A below. If the complainant declines to file a written complaint, because there's too many complaints in there that get confusing. So I would file a written complaint. The superintendent or their designee should properly prepare a written summary of the complaint. We just,
What it has to have in it.
there's a
So
difference.
I apologize. Are you saying that from the
A
first
written.
sentence, you would like it to say, "May file a written complaint"?
I said if a complainant declines to file a written complaint.
Okay.
Because the complainant is filing a complaint, but
Yeah.
it-
And the superintendent has
is to
a
write it.
responsibility to write up based on their oral.
exactly,
Right.
so I would just add the word written in there to
Yeah.
make it clear.
If the complainant declines to file a written complaint?
Yep.
Okay.
Yes,
I'm
please.
questioning the written complaint.
Yeah?
It's not, we don't have everyone that has the ability to do that. Perhaps they're, have different language, different, So how do we, we've done oral reports before.
It is, but if
Well,
the
and this allows it.
That's what this says. If the complainant declines to file a complaint, how can a complainant not file a complaint? Right?
So he's
They're-
saying that the first sentence is describing a written complaint. So the
Right.
second sentence should say, if they decline to file a written complaint,
You need to-
here are the things that,
you need to summarize in writing what
Yeah.
they said. That's
I
the
need
part.
to summarize it.
Yes,
Yeah.
according to
okay.
this
Yeah,
paragraph, you do. Yes.
I want to make sure
Yeah.
that we
Yeah.
don't expect that as the
No.
only way to
Well-
get the complaint.
Says they should
That's
be
what I'm-
encouraged. If they don't, you still have to
Yeah.
write it up.
Write it
Yep,
down.
yep. I can take your oral report.
all right. And then we have Q, which is dissemination and notice, which is a very simple statement that a copy of this policy will be included in the student parent handbooks and on the district website. And now we have also included a new R, which is that the district shall report annually out to the school board. Anybody want to go for section S? Anything else we want to add?
Excuse me. Thank you.
Kathleen or Karen, do you have any clarifying questions, comments, concerns, additions, retractions?
I'm just looking at under legal references where I'm turning to district policy 249, para, it says records retention. I'm looking at, I think it was, I
Some in the
got
back. Yeah, we've got them.
records retention. It's something else though. It's not para. I'll give you that wording, but it's something else.
I think the legal references section might be just what was in the original policy. So we
Okay.
haven't actually incorporated any of the,
Okay.
whatever additions you might have added into the various drafts.
I'll look, yeah, I got
So I
it
just
right
wanted
here.
I figured we'd wait till the end
Yep.
to update legal references and adoption dates and whatnot. But if you have things you want to add, definitely do so.
I do like how this says at the end corresponds to NHSBA policy JKAA.
Yep, it's very helpful.
I mean, that's a resource for you, you pay for that with your dues to the School Board Association, so it's a good resource for us.
Right, but it corresponds with other districts who use that institution.
Right, because we've talked about that. We don't have the same numbering system,
Right.
but it's nice when we have that reference so that we can find it.
Yep.
Someone changes district, they're looking for that numbering.
All right, friends. Do I have a motion to move this to the full board for first reading?
So moved.
Second?
You guys did it so fast I didn't write it down.
It's okay. We can repeat.
No, it's okay. Jim Richards, seconded by Liz Boucher. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Excellent. Thank you so much for all your diligent hard work
you.
on this policy. Kathleen, Karen, thank you. It was a slog. We appreciate it. Oh, that motion passes. I always forget that part. All right. On to item number 3 on the agenda, which is protocol for member requested policy review. This came up because we've had a lot of conversations lately about policies we would like to explore as a board or as an individual board member that aren't necessarily coming to us from the district because there's a required need for changes because of the changes in law, et cetera, et cetera. I myself didn't have an understanding of what the process is because in the time I've been on this committee, we've never had a member-driven policy request. It's usually come from the district or it's come from the board itself. So I thought it would be a good time to have that conversation about what happens when we have a board member, let's say myself, that is interested in looking at a particular policy, let's say bullying. And I say, I would really like to review this on the policy committee. I'd like to make changes. do I have the right as a board member to ask the policy committee to take up that charge? Or is that something that needs to be requested of the full board? Or is it at the president's discretion? So I wanted to open that up and open it up for discussion.
I mean, I think this committee can decide whichever policies it wants to take up. We have had instances where the full board has directed the policy committee to review a policy by taking a vote, but I think you set the agenda for this committee, and so if someone comes to you with a request, you can, or you think that you should bring it to your group and decide which ones you want to prioritize. I think that happened, a little bit when I was on this committee last year. We looked at a bunch of policies and flagged a few that we thought needed to be looked at.
Yeah, the board as a whole, asked us to look at early admittance as one of the policies, because the one that was in place was just say no. But they felt like that they needed to have more leverage. We've actually used that policy this year, so, yeah, you've done that in the past. We didn't do a lot of it, because we were all playing catch-up and going back and looking at things that were required and needed to be done. So, most of our work over the first few years was all about catching up and getting our policies up to date.
And
So-
the legislature keeps adding new kinds of.
Right, which
Right.
keeps us busy, but,
Right.
there's been a number of policies that, because of situations, that happen, for instance, the use of facilities, that happens to be on my list.
Yep.
It's in the packet tonight for your, just for your review, but, I think the Finance Committee asked to review all the 300s, right? Which are just about done?
Yeah,
They're done, we're just having Maureen and Jack review them, and it's a busy time for them, so we're giving them a little more time, but those are done in terms of making sure they're aligned. But that came from, is it the Finance Committee, right?
I think so.
So the
Yeah.
finance committee voted on that, or was that from the finance committee chair?
It came from the
Sure.
committee.
From the entire committee. but
Yeah, I
believe
think
it
there was
last
probably a
year's committee.
discussion in the committee, and we asked,
Yeah.
maybe the,
There was consensus, not necessarily a formal motion.
right, the policy
Yeah.
committee could say, no, we don't want to look at this.
Well, and that's why
And then
I'm
it could
asking.
go to
yeah.
the full board, and, but, you can, as a committee, you can put things on the agenda. You can take a request from an individual member and say, yes, that's a good idea.
Who says yes? The policy committee?
The chair.
Policy committee.
The committee or the chair.
I am starting to think about this more, and I think there needs to be some policy in place, some protocol in place that we all abide by, because we may be in general consensus of what would be appropriate to review or not. What happens if there is someone on the board who would like
Right.
things
Then you
to
can-
go awry, and just to say, I want to review this, or I would like to rewrite this?
Then you can vote not to.
So the policy have a vote, the committee itself, then I think that would be, if there's 4 of us here, then we should all have a vote, should we review this policy?
Yeah, if someone
I-
brings you a, Jim.
Yeah, no, I was gonna say, I agree. I think the situation where the entire board directs us to look at a policy is a pretty easy one. And I think that this, however, in that case, as in all cases, I think this committee should set the schedule or priority, because I would not, to Liz's point, I would not want one individual board member who has a particular passion, desire, whatever, agenda item, to sideline the other work that we're doing to create a policy, discussion that preempted other things that maybe in the general view of us as a committee is not as important. So I agree with Liz that I think individual members can recommend a review of a policy, can actually submit a written policy for us to consider, but I believe it's this committee who should vote as to whether or not they take it up or not, unless directed by the full board.
And I'd be concerned to say just the chair is able to choose that,
Right.
because I don't
Sure.
know who could be sitting at that chair level either.
But, I think it is the chair's responsibility to prioritize the work.
Certainly
of
prioritize the
committee.
work.
And, I would hope it would be consensus, but, somebody has to set an agenda for the, in consultation for these meetings. But the rest of the committee could say, look at it and say, I move that we leave this policy untouched. And if that vote happens, then you can move on to the next thing. But, the chair certainly has to be able to, work to set an agenda.
I think
Hopefully
that's fair.
in consultation, so that they could get a request, they could put it on.
And that's not I'm not talking about like every policy that needs to be updated
Yeah.
because of law or
But,
RSA.
but
that would still come. It's individual board members requesting a policy.
And, I
reviewed.
would hope that the chair would bring that to the committee and say, do we want to look at this or not look at this? But
You
that
would-
would be, in some way the
Then
discretion
the committee
of.
vote.
Yeah.
Then the committee will vote then. I think, I don't know if it
I
should,
would assume
but we're making assumptions.
No, well,
We don't know what's going to happen
what
in
I-
the future. Who's
what I
going to
would
sit on this
like, then
board.
I won't say assume. What I would like is, with the understanding that the chair sets the agenda, any member can make a motion to review a policy.
Yep.
That motion can be seconded and voted on. I would say that when requests come from an individual member, that would be the protocol. That generally we operate under consensus, but these motions do provide a record. So the motion would, from my perspective, would need to be made and seconded in order to advance to a vote and discussion. And also, if the board asks us to review, that's not the case. We will review.
Right.
It
Yeah.
will get
Right.
on the agenda if it comes from the full board.
I agree.
And I'm comfortable with that. And then as the chair, my responsibility would be to bring, and I feel that responsibility, to bring any request that came to me to the committee, because I'm not in the business of gatekeeping the needs of any individual member, but then it is as a group that we make that decision.
But if there was a case where there was a chair who chose not to bring things to the committee, a member could bring that
Yes.
to the full board and to ask for
Oh, I see a vote at the board level.
vote of the board
Exactly.
member
Got
to
it.
direct the committee
Got
to
it.
do this.
Okay.
What about, say, we wanted to, could we to make a motion to add that to the agenda here, even if the chair did not? Say, for instance, the chair, there we have a particularly controversial policy that is viewed from one group on this side differently than a group on the other side, and someone feels very passionate. There may be 3 members of this board who are in agreement, of this committee that are in agreement, but that chair says, I don't believe in that, and I'm not gonna bring it up. Then I would think that we as a committee should be
Yeah.
allowed to vote to bring to a discussion,
I-
without going to the full board.
No,
Okay.
no, I was thinking of a member outside
Okay.
of this committee, but no, a
Yeah.
majority of this committee still
Okay.
makes the
I'm fine with that.
decisions.
But I see, I wanna, I don't blanket wanna give the chair the right to schedule something and say, okay, we wanna talk about something that came up and, that's scheduled for 2025 in, November or
Right.
something. Not-
No, I think-
Unless we can get to it sooner, but I don't see that we're getting it too soon.
I think
I don't want
if
that
this
to
committee or the full board felt something was urgent, then a majority could make a motion and say, no, we're gonna take this up
Yeah.
now.
happen. Okay.
And a majority could table,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
So if
Right.
something
Yeah,
comes to
sure,
us that is just
certainly.
no longer
Yeah.
timely, you could make the motion to table and it would just sit on the agenda until the time was right.
Okay.
One of the pieces of this that I'm thinking about is the burden on the district to generate work that may or may not move forward. So I think having a set procedure gives them some guardrails so that they know if somebody comes to them and says, hey, can you deep dive on this particular policy for me? That's not a request of the committee, that's not a request of the board, it's a request of a member and can be answered in due time. Because I just want to make sure that pressure, you guys are so busy, basically. I want to make sure that, everyone's prioritizing their time and not asking too much of each other and of you. which I'm saying that for myself because, you know.
No, I think that's a good point.
Yeah, and we'll let you know when we can handle it. I mean, I have a list, I know you know, I have a list of policies that have been mentioned, talked about, discussed, and so, you know, I have to take it step by step. You can't do everything at once. It's impossible.
Are you okay with me drafting that protocol as just sort of like a working document for our committee, and then we can just throw it?
I just took some notes while you were
and then we can
talking,
throw it
too,
in the
so,
minutes.
yeah.
Okay, perfect. Which actually leads us right into the next agenda item, which is adding new business to the monthly school board agenda. So right now, our agendas don't include a section for new business. Our meetings are long, it's understandable. But if somebody did have concerns about a policy or wanted to bring it up, new business is kind of where it would land. So we had been talking about, talking about this protocol, when could someone bring it up? And Kathleen mentioned adding new business to the agenda. So it's on this agenda just for discussion.
But not expecting an answer. I mean, not
Right.
expecting, if there's something on new business that we're not prepared to answer, it's there, it's on the agenda, it's something that we want to talk about in the future, not that night, right?
Correct.
Yeah,
Yeah. It would just be bringing new business.
If there's a new business, I want to talk to
Sort
you
of like
about
public comment,
paving
but
of
for the
the
board.
driveway, when I don't know when they're going to pay the, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I'm just trying, I mean, we have a process for amending the agenda if people want to bring things forward. We have a process for members requesting something to go on the agenda. Any member, that's in our policies, any member can request, and then the executive committee decides preliminarily if something goes on the agenda, and then a member could come to a meeting and add something, make a motion to add something to the agenda as well, that agenda or a future agenda. So I feel like, I worry that a new business category becomes really amorphous, and it becomes where we end up having we could end up making decisions or discussions that aren't publicly noticed.
Or it could get into a situation where someone's
have
asking.
answers.
Right, you don't
Yeah.
have, and then it's now.
And there's always situations where you don't have answers, but I don't know, I feel like we have a process for adding items to the agenda already. It's either you can request it, as you did last month, request that the executive committee put it on the agenda, or you could make a motion to amend the agenda at the beginning of the meeting, which people have done.
Right.
Too.
I think the sentiment, the methodology is permissive, right? It's asking
Yeah.
something to be put on the agenda
Yeah.
or making a motion to add, and so it becomes the decision of the full board whether or not that discussion point will
Right.
be up for discussion that night. Sorry, I'm getting tired. The idea of new business would be almost like a point of personal privilege where somebody just wants to discuss something that's on their mind that they would like to maybe, notify the board of, notify a concern. I understand that. I also think that it could morph into just about anything.
Yeah, I can see both sides
I also
of
feel like
this.
that happens a lot during the superintendent's report already.
Yeah.
What's an example we use? Can we just have it?
Yeah,
like an
of what
example?
you're looking.
Yes, so let's say the weapons policy, for instance, if we hadn't brought a resolution, but we just wanted to note a concern and maybe discuss pathways for dealing with that concern. It could come up in new business, and we could say, that sounds like a policy thing. So rather than having that conversation off-site, it happens in public, to say, as a member, this is what I'm hearing. It's not on the agenda, but I got a call from a constituent today, and it's on my mind. And it becomes a conversation of the board on what the next steps might be. Again, I understand that our meetings are long. They're very well organized as it is. It is
And
open.
so that example, I think that's something that happened. The superintendent reported on that to us, and then that is a place for the discussion. I'm thinking of during COVID, for example. I used every superintendent's report time to say, and when are we going back to school?
Yeah.
And when are we going back to school? Because
Remember that.
that was, what I, was focused on. I think,
Well, so I think what you're saying is that this new business section is already embedded in our more casual agenda item, which is the superintendent's report, because it just says superintendent's report, but then we kind of talk about a range
but
of
I think it
matters.
also has other,
I tried to give you a leeway, a lot
I
of
think there are
topics
other
on that.
ways to
absolutely.
do it, I guess, is the question. I don't know. Jim, do you have any thoughts?
I have some concerns on adding a new business section because it just is basically a wide open anything. And then the other thing is, how do you define it? Well, when we have a leave of absence, that is actually new business, so it should have to go in that section as opposed to another section. There's a lot of our existing agenda that is new business. So I'm not comfortable necessarily with the title of it. And I think we already have a method of amending the agenda or adjusting the agenda already, so I'm not sure I see the need for it.
And now I'm looking
I
I
don't
don't
know.
have an agenda in front of me. I wish I did.
I mean, I guess I can see both of these. My biggest concern is how would this section ever be weaponized?
Well, it
How does it
has.
help? How does it
this-
hurt?
this-
Anytime we make a change, right?
This, I'm looking back to
Yeah.
more contentious times or different times that went in there, and I'm just a little concerned. There were times even, like, not even contentious, there was times when prior boards, someone has brought up, I want to make a resolution based on this, and the board members were a little concerned that we had no time to review or prepare or look at wording or anything. It was just there. And typically those type of motions got tabled, but it was,
But it's out there.
it's out there.
So
And
that
part
starts
of
just
the
got public discussion.
And part of the agenda is so that, one, we can do our homework and research and we can be more informed, and two, that the public knows we're going to talk about it.
And that's
And
my
as opposed to
concern.
something coming up and now all of a sudden we are talking about it, but we never let anybody know. That's my
Although there is a
concern.
process for
Right.
doing
Doing
that
that,
now.
Yeah.
But I feel like it's at the beginning of the meeting and then we put something on the.
Typically. But, I don't want to in any way inhibit or stifle
Yeah.
any member from being able to make a motion or bring a topic to the discussion that they feel is important, but I don't necessarily want a no rules sort of a.
I mean,
section.
I also think, we have our other business section. People could ask at the beginning to amend the agenda or even during that section, say, I have other business as well. Sort of other business is probably more fitting than new
New
business.
business, that's true.
Yeah.
So,
Other
and we do
business.
have that on our agenda already.
That works for me.
Okay. I would also say if you put new business on the agenda, and not that it makes any difference now, is that it just is, it's any topic, anything immediately, and that's just a little bit of a concern for
Yeah.
me.
Well, and I
Unless-
think the motivation behind it was just to make sure that every member feels that if there is a timely topic that they would like to bring to the board, that if it doesn't fit otherwise into the agenda, that they feel comfortable understanding process for modifying the agenda, understand the process for when is the right time to speak, so that we don't get to the end of the meeting and they haven't had a chance. Because we do move through a lot of business, but there's also so much more that goes unsaid because there's just too much to talk about.
And I do think it's difficult for new members.
Yes.
Because when new members start, you're just kind of like, oh gosh, I have no idea how to do this. No one told me how to do it. No, but you do have to pay attention. But to that point,
Yeah. And I think we can accomplish that by just being good mentors to new members and being very clear and communicative about how the agenda works.
that's what you all have done.
Yeah. All right. Any other comments on that before we move on? Excellent, thank you. Item 5, initial review, use of facilities. Everyone should have a stack, it seems, of policies.
Can I just
it
introduce
away.
this?
Yeah.
Thank you. As you know, there have been a lot of concerns about use of facilities, over the last several months. We actually had a group already begin to do some discussion around it. Karen, Matt, Glenda up at the high school, who does all of the, receives all the application for use of facilities, as well as Jack. And they met, they began to look at the policy. You have two policies in front of you, 741, and that exist currently in your policy. They're identical, 821 and 741. And 741.1, right. And so that really has to do with, local organizations, nonprofits, and using the facility. So those are in existence, but what they don't do, they really didn't detail some of the concerns that we've had around use of facilities. So I thought you should, this is almost like a homework assignment, and I apologize for that, but maybe take a peek at these three policies, mark them up, whatever. But I also included in your packet the New Hampshire School Board Association policy.
Take this one.
No, it should say NHSBA.
Oh, yeah, there it is. Thank you.
Okay. And, as you know, that as the New Hampshire School Board always says, they try to keep their policies simple and just to the point with not a lot of detail. So that just is really an overview policy. But I also put in a couple of samples for you. In addition, there were two policies from New Hampshire School Board Association. One was use of facilities, KF, and then KFA, which is conduct on school property.
It's KFA?
KFA. We don't talk about her conduct, but anyway, that's on there too, because the issues came up. How do we handle the situations with things happening, smoking on property, use of alcohol, weapons, all of that. And then we did a little bit more, and I pulled a policy that we thought, actually Karen had suggested it to me, was the Bedford policy, which was pretty detailed. So take a peek at that one, look at all the things that they're doing. And then I actually worked on the policy for Hampton. So we pulled that up because that was, again, facilities were used a lot by the community. They didn't have a lot of community spaces like we have in Concord, so they used the schools a lot. Anyway, I thought tonight was just simply to introduce this. We'd like to bring in this policy to the next meeting. We have so many people that use our facilities. I get requests. I just got one this week about using Millbrook and for supporting a family that had a death. And so, we're trying to deal with it. I think this would help.
Okay.
Thank you.
May I ask a question? And I apologize, because I should already know this, but I will ask it anyway. Do we have to have the exact same policy as 741 and 821?
No, I think in the past, we had 100 through 900 series. And I think what happened was that used to be that if it applied to, say, students and also to personnel, we made sure to put them in both sections. So that if personnel who, they knew, for like example, sexual harassment covers students, covers personnel. So it did get a little redundant. And we didn't do it that often, but when I came on board, that was practice.
Okay.
And it sounds like, will you be coming to us with recommendations?
Well, that's what we'd like to do, is
Okay.
we'd like to get a recommendation. Let's start a draft.
Yep.
Put together what we think would be helpful to the district, and certainly have you all help us
Okay.
walk through
Craft
it.
it. All right.
And making sure that it addresses the concerns that I've heard. We do have other policies. I won't kid you. We had weapons that we want to look at, class size. I think I told you that class size we're gathering. What we're doing is
Do we have a date for that?
the class size?
Yeah.
No, not yet.
Okay.
But what we did was we went out and looked at all the districts that were similar size to us, and to look at their class size. And then we have the 300 policies. They're done. We just need final check by Jack and Maureen. We also have a policy that's new, we need to update, is on nursing moms. And the last one that we want to look at is suicide.
Well, of course, nursing moms will be addressed in the new Title IX updates, which I'm sitting on the working group with the New Hampshire School Board Association as we're working that, but yeah, it's.
You will see a Title IX. They did come out with recommendations.
Great.
They still have a huge piece, in my opinion, that they avoided, was sports, the athletics. So, but we did get, and I didn't think it was that dramatic, to be honest with you. But we'll bring any slight changes that were in those. So we do have work ahead of us. That's why when you do ask us to do other policies, just know that we're not dragging our feet. It's
Right.
just that we do a lineup of policies to look at, and who knows what will be come to
legislature's
us.
not done yet.
Yeah, that's right, and who knows what will come to us in June.
Yep.
I will get an update on all new policies at the superintendent's meeting in June, so that's really helpful, because they spend a whole morning just talking about legislative updates. So that's helpful to me to know which ones we need to start to gather information on.
Nursing moms being students, because I believe that would
Could
have to be
Employees?
separate from
We actually-
employees because of collective bargaining requirements and things like that.
I'm proud of that. We actually already have a pregnant student policy.
It's horrible. It's
Yeah,
horrible.
we
I don't
worked
want to
on-
talk about it.
Maybe we
worked on
should
that.
talk about
We should. We should. It's
Is that on the-
it's
is
a
that going on the
horrible,
list?
regressive
Yeah.
policy.
So-
They've somewhat
knew you didn't
enforced
like
by
it.
state law, but yeah.
So a lot of that'll carry over into the other one. Hopefully we can combine and maybe get rid of one. The question I have on moving forward on the facilities, and maybe it's too soon, but this may be one where I forget the term, Cara, where we decide to not use the old one, because it's the, you know what I mean, what do
Oh,
you-
just repeal
So
and replace?
repeal it.
Yeah, where we say,
Yeah.
we're just striking the entire thing and we're rewriting
It's
it.
mostly about fees. It
Yeah.
really isn't about use and what the expectations are for appropriateness.
that. Is
I'll leave it at that, right?
Yep.
When using our facilities.
Yeah,
So,
all right. I apologize for that. My
Now, other
daughter's
than that,
asking when I'm coming home.
Other than that, I have nothing else.
Okay, excellent. Does anyone have any other topic before we entertain a motion to adjourn? No? Do I have a motion?
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you. Seconded?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? This meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.